Leo Abad remembered the first time he saw her work in the university gallery. A single broad canvas, taller than he was, entirely coated in shifting gradations of ultramarine. At first glance, the painting looked almost monochrome, but if a viewer remained still long enough, tiny saffron pinpricks surfaced, trembled, and disappeared, like stars absorbed by dawn. Leo, composer, violinist, synesthete wannabe, stood for nearly an hour, transfixed. He did not know then that the painter had stood in the corner of the room the entire time, arms folded, appraising him with the steady, evaluating look of someone accustomed to reading lips yet preferring to read posture. Her name was Sarai de la Cruz, an alumna 2 years older than Leo. When the curator offered to introduce them, Leo babbled nervously about how the canvas felt like a suspended, unresolved chord, and Sarai raised a single eyebrow. She touched her fingertips to her throat, then spread them outward. "Thank you." The curator translated the rest. "She's deaf," he explained unnecessarily. "Since birth." Sarai nodded, smile slight, as though daring Leo to reveal the cliché response: pity, admiration, or some prattle about tragedy overcome. Instead, Leo signed the little he had managed to teach himself from online videos. Beautiful color, like night singing. The syntax was clumsy. Sarai's eyes softened anyway, and she corrected his hand shape for singing. Then, to the curator's surprise, she wrote her number on the back of the event program and pressed it into Leo's palm. They met the following Saturday in a coffee shop with bad lighting and worse acoustic treatment. Sarai arrived carrying a sketchbook too large to fit on the table. Leo came armed with staff paper, a fountain pen, and 2 dictionaries. One bilingual English-Spanish, the other a pocket ASL guide. Their conversation resembled the place itself, chaotic, echoing, impossible to follow. Yet something about the effort invigorated them both. Leo tried signing again. Sarai jotted swift sentences in Spanish. Leo replied in English and in shaky Spanish. Sarai drew diagrams of color wheels. Their drinks went cold. At last, Leo produced an idea he had rehearsed in his head 20 times. "I want to write music that looks like your paintings." Sarai set down her pencil. Cat-like focus filled her face. She wrote, "How?" He shrugged. "I'm not sure. I've read about synesthesia. Some people see tones as colors. Maybe we can reverse it. You could teach me to hear color." Sarai laughed silently, shoulders shaking. She scribbled, "You want the deaf girl to teach the hearing boy to hear color?" Irony. Then, maybe possible. Need patience. They began meeting every Wednesday afternoon in Sarai's studio apartment. Half the floor was covered with paint-spattered tarps. The other half with carpets muffling footsteps so Sarai could feel vibrations of visitors through her soles. Leo brought his portable keyboard. He toyed with drones and overtone sequences while Sarai mixed pigments. She insisted that Leo wear a blindfold at first. "You must forget you know blue is blue," she wrote on a whiteboard. "You will learn my definitions." The first lesson concerned red. Sarai guided Leo's hands to a ceramic bowl filled with rough, powdery pigment. The dust coated his fingertips, smelled faintly of iron, oxidized blood. She tapped his shoulder, then placed a wireless bone conduction headset against his jaw. She hit play on her phone. Leo heard nothing through the earpieces, only felt faint buzzes through his skull. Sarai then dripped turpentine onto the red powder, grinding it with a palette knife until a thick paste formed. The knife scraped the ceramic, scritch, growl, scree. Vibrations reached Leo's cheekbones via the headset. Sarai paused, wiped a sentence onto the whiteboard. "This texture." A low cello tremolo. "Listen to the gravel. Let the buzz in your jaw become sound in your mind." Gradually, Leo learned to associate the tactile friction with an imagined sonic roughness, the rasp of bow hair scarcely leaving the string, the air pregnant with menace. When Sarai finally allowed him to lift the blindfold, the red on her palette appeared darker than any crimson he had known, almost black in places. His brain flickered, low cello tremolo. The association felt instantaneous, like a memory. Over weeks they advanced through the spectrum. Orange emerged from the sound of a jazz trumpet mute popped free mid-phrase, the wet plosive unlocking brightness. Yellow was the hiss of aerosol paint, transformed in Leo's mind into a high-coal legno violins rustling behind the bridge. Green, according to Sarai, was silence, specifically the empty resonance of a room after laughter subsides. Not absolute quiet, but charged expectancy. To convey it, she led Leo to a greenhouse at dawn, removed his earplugs, and let humidity settle onto his eardrums like velvet. Somewhere water dripped, birds rustled leaves, yet everything felt suspended. That, she signed, is Viridian. Blue proved the hardest. Sarai's own ultramarine defied linear translation. She gestured for Leo to sit, then produced from a drawer 2 tuning forks, one A440, one D294. She struck them simultaneously, placed each handle on opposite sides of Leo's skull. The resulting interference pattern hummed, beating slow pulses. Sarai pressed his hands to her sternum so he could feel her breathing steady and deep. Blue, she mouthed. Blue is the ghost between frequencies, the beat you don't hear until both notes coexist. Leo's spine tingled. He watched her canvas again, realized the saffron pinpricks were not stars, but moments when the beats aligned, briefly brighter. Throughout autumn, Leo carried a pocket notebook of color-sound lexicon they co-authored. He spent nights at the conservatory practice rooms, experimenting with harmonics, multiphonics, prepared piano mutings, all in pursuit of Sarai's hues. He began composing short etudes he called pigment studies. Sarai attended the private run-throughs. She could not hear the pieces, but she watched his body, saw which muscles engaged, observed audience faces. Afterward, she critiqued, too busy, too bright, not enough breathing space for green. She insisted on tactile proofs as well. She drummed fingers on his shoulder during passages she sensed tension. Eventually, Leo rewrote an etude until, during performance, Sarai closed her eyes, inhaled, and tapped the color wheel section corresponding to cobalt. Success. In December, Sarai revealed her own ambition. She unrolled 3 massive canvases, blank except for faint charcoal grid lines. Beneath them lay a blueprint with boxes labeled Fermata, Glissando, Cadenza. She pointed to both of them, made a sweeping gesture connecting canvas to score. Symphony, Leo guessed aloud. Sarai nodded. She drew a spiral, then tapped her chest and his ear. Symphony for heart and hearing. They drafted a plan, 4 movements, each corresponding to a season of color perception. Instruments would be arranged around the audience. Projections of Sarai's live painting would appear on translucent scrims encircling listeners. Musicians would wear bone conduction headsets emitting subsonic cues for Sarai to conduct vibrations she could feel though not hear. They titled the piece Diapason of Light. Funding, however, became an immediate obstacle. Neither possessed wealthy patrons. Scrims, projectors, custom headsets, all expensive. When Leo proposed crowdfunding, Sarai shook her head. Too slow. Instead, she called upon the network of deaf artists she had met through residencies. Within a month, they organized a pop-up exhibit in an abandoned train depot. Paintings lit by strobes synced to subwoofers pumping 20 hertz pressure waves no hearing person could detect, but everyone could feel in their guts. Leo improvised violin lines that twisted according to volunteers' sign language storytelling. The event drew a curious cross-section of communities: gallery regulars, electronic music aficionados, teens from the local school for the deaf. By final count, they sold enough art and collected enough donations to rent the small experimental theater downtown for 2 weeks. Rehearsals began in earnest in February. Sarai, terrified of letting sound slip beyond her grasp, attended every session, sitting barefoot near the timpani so she could sense pulse. She quickly learned to recognize each musician's characteristic vibration footprint. The French horn's warm marbling felt distinct from the brittle speckle of the piccolo. Sarai developed silent cues: stomp in 3/4 for tempo, sweep of arm for crescendo, closed fists for subito quiet. The ensemble, intrigued by her authority, adapted with surprising speed. For Leo, the greater challenge lay in orchestrating color without becoming literal. He resisted assigning, say, violins to yellow simply because yellow was high. Sarai pushed him further. She asked, "What color is a saxophone multiphonic when layered over a contrabass clarinet?" Leo shut his eyes, listened, saw a swirling mudded teal shot with copper flecks. He scribbled the description. Sarai nodded. Good. Then she mixed paint accordingly on her palette. Their partnership soon attracted attention from the conservatory's composition chair, Professor Marecki, a stern modernist with a fondness for discomforting intervals. He attended a rehearsal, arms folded. After the run-through, he cornered Leo. "This experiment," he began, "is aesthetically ambitious, yes, but it risks dilettantism if you rely on gimmick." Leo tensed. Sarai watched from across the room, sensing conflict but not the words. Leo steadied himself. "Professor, our goal isn't spectacle. We're creating a new perceptual grammar." Marecki remained skeptical. Yet 3 weeks later, he offered to premiere Diapason of Light during the conservatory's New Works Festival, provided the final score show structural rigor. Leo accepted, tried not to panic. The day before dress rehearsal, disaster struck. A lighting technician dropped a water bottle onto a projector, short-circuiting the lens. Replacement parts would take a week, far past their slot. Without projections, Sarai's live painting could not be magnified, and half the audience would miss visual nuance. Leo's stomach knotted. Sarai arrived to find him slumped against the stage door, head in hands. She crouched, lifted his chin. He signed, "Broken. No projector." In reply, Sarai shrugged, then tapped her own eyes, then the audience risers. She dragged a roll of translucent plastic onto the floor. Step by step, she cut it into long ribbons, painting them in thick strokes of pigment that dried within minutes under heat lamps. By dusk, she had woven a massive canopy of color strips that hung like aurora borealis around the stage. No magnification required. The audience would sit inside the painting itself. Opening night sold out. Deaf patrons arrived early, curious about chair-mounted transducers that would relay low frequencies through metal frames. Hearing patrons received blindfolds at the door, to be worn during certain sections. Professor Marecki paced backstage, muttering about risk. Sarai calmed herself by pressing her palms flat against the marley floor, feeling the thrum of pre-concert murmurs. Leo tuned backstage amidst rain-stick rustles from percussion. The theater lights dimmed. Movement. Vernal glass. Sarai stepped onto a riser, lifted her brush, and with the musicians her downbeat manifested as a single open fifth from strings, pure, hollow. Audience blindfolds remained on. Sarai painted swift arcs of pale green on the canopy, pigment dripping like dew. Leo's score called for microtonal inflections, generating quivering beats. The ghost notes Sarai defined as blue within green. Slowly, woodwinds entered, their breath key clicks amplified to physical taps on seatbacks. Deaf attendees gasped, feeling patterns under their fingers. When blindfolds were removed, eyes met a glowing lattice of greens pulsing under ultraviolet lamps, every drip matching marimba ostinato. Movement, too. Auburn solstice. Sarai switched to oils heavy with iron oxide. Violas initiated the low tremolo she had first taught Leo months ago. Scarlet manifest. Brass cut through with muted bursts. Oranges smashed against reds on canvas. Leo inserted silence strategically, letting green absence appear. In those gaps, Sarai halted painting, hands outstretched. The only perception available was the vibration through chairs. Even hearing patrons felt temporarily deaf. When sound returned, they realized they had tasted Sarai's world for a moment. During intermission, chatter erupted. A teenage girl signed excitedly while her hearing mother tried to mimic the gestures. A critic dictated voice memos about synesthetic dramaturgy. Professor Marecki dabbed his eyes, pretending dust had settled there. Movement the third. Cerulean eclipse. House lights cooled to dim sapphire. Sarai's canopy reflected light like deep ocean trenches. Leo had composed for 10 bowed vibraphones placed around the periphery, bars prepared with putty to lower pitch. Their drones merged into standing waves that rattled rib cages. Over this, a single flute fluttered multiphonics, teal shot with copper. Sarai steady dipped brush in cobalt, letting controlled rivulets run downward like eclipsed starlight. In one corner, a saffron pinprick appeared. Trumpet harmon, mute pop. The crowd inhaled collectively. During the pause before the final movement, Leo approached Sarai for a silent exchange. His hands shook. He knew what came next, demanded perfection. Sarai squeezed his wrist, grounding him. Movement 4. White Ember. The score began with complete darkness and stillness. Pure green, silence charged. Sarai, feeling with feet, paced center stage. A subwoofer emitted a 20 Hz sine wave few could hear but many could feel. Into that void, Leo instructed the brass to enter with clustered chords just above audible threshold, beating against each other, birthing blue from interference. Strings climbed, layering harmonics. Colors modulated across canopy as LED strobes pulsed. Sarai splattered white paint that glowed under strobe, each droplet like ember sparks. At the climactic unison, all instruments hit a concert C fortissimo. Lights flared full, blindfolds optional. Deaf and hearing alike were inundated by vibrational white heat. Some viewers later said they saw the chord. The final chord faded to a sustained breath noise from flutists. Sarai lowered her brush. Leo cut off orchestra. Silence returned, green once more. For a long minute nobody applauded, as though afraid sound would fracture what hung between them. Then first a single stomp from a deaf teenager, echoing Sarai's tempo cue. Others joined, stomping, clapping, signing cheers. The theater shook. Backstage, Professor Marecki arrived, eyes wet undisguised. "You have rewritten the synesthetic lexicon," he whispered. He reached for Sarai's hand, realized the irony, instead bowed slightly. Sarai bowed back, grinning. Reviews ranged from laudatory to bewildered. One columnist hailed diapason of light as the birth of a new genre, chromacoustics. Another dismissed it as installation art with orchestral garnish. None of that mattered to the duo. They were already plotting a tour to unconventional spaces, a lighthouse, a salt mine, a mountaintop reservoir, each environment promising fresh textures. Months later, on a platform overlooking the Pacific, they rehearsed amid gull cries and crashing surf. Sarai painted onto transparent kites tethered to steel cables resonating like aeolian harps. Leo tested how wind pitch correlated with indigo. At dusk, they shared a thermos of coffee. Sarai signed, "Did you really hear the colors or only pretend?" Leo considered. He recalled the first red lesson, the iron dust under his nails, the cello growl vibrating his jaw yet never truly audible. "I think," he said slowly, "there's no difference now between hearing and pretending. My brain filled the silence with music, and the music became real." Sarai nodded, satisfied. She dipped a fingertip into ultramarine, brushed a streak across Leo's temple. He laughed. "What note is that?" She raised her hand, splayed fingers, let them waver softly like the beating of two tuning forks. Leo closed his eyes, listened inward. Somewhere between A and D in the ghost zone, blue blossomed, resonant and infinite.